I slept with a stranger on my wedding night. My wedding day. It was the epitome of what one might call storybook perfect. The weather had cooperated, casting the entire affair in a soft, golden hue that one often finds in those romantic films from yesteryears. The kind of light that makes everything seem ethereal, too beautiful to be rooted in reality. Guests were dressed in their finest, and there was a symphony of laughter, well wishes, and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses. But me, I was the center of it all, dressed in a gown that flowed like water, a delicate tiara crowning my chestnut locks. Everyone remarked on how radiant I looked, how my eyes shone with the light of love, and they weren't wrong. I did love Chris. I do. He was everything one could hope for in a partner, kind, loving, understanding. In many ways, that day was everything I had ever dreamed of. And yet, as the sun began its descent, casting elongated shadows and painting the world in hues of orange and pink, a familiar restlessness settled within me, a hunger, an urge. It was a sensation I had grown familiar with over the years, a silent siren's call that I found myself heeding more often than not. So, while the party continued in full swing, and Chris was pulled away by a group of old college mates, reminiscing about some long-forgotten incident, I found my feet guiding me away from the lights, the laughter, the binding commitment I had just undertaken. My heart raced, not with fear of being caught, but with the anticipation of the illicit, a thrill that was all too familiar. The location? An old pub, not too far from the venue. Dimly lit, its walls soaked with secrets of countless patrons over the years. The kind of place where one can be anonymous, even if just for a little while. And there, seated at the bar with a glass of amber liquid, was him, the mysterious stranger whose allure was hard to pin down but impossible to ignore. He looked up as I entered, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. I could sense the recognition, the mutual understanding of the silent agreement we were about to enter. There were no words exchanged, just a nod, an invitation. What followed was a dance, not of bodies, but of minds, conversations dipped in innuendo, subtle touches that sent electric jolts through my veins. For that stolen hour, the world outside ceased to exist. It was just him and me, bound by a connection that defied logic. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was time to return. To the glittering lights, to my husband. With one last lingering touch, one that promised more yet spoke of the transient nature of our encounter, I stepped out into the cold night air. The weight of my actions, the gravity of the betrayal hung heavy, but intertwined with the guilt was a thrill, a heady intoxication that made it all too addictive. That night, as I lay next to Chris, I realized that love and desire, fidelity and passion are not always aligned. Sometimes they exist on parallel tracks, never destined to meet. And sometimes, in the rare moments they do converge, they burn with an intensity that can scorch everything in its path. Throughout my life, I've always found solace in the written word, and what better confidant than a diary? A small, unassuming book, its pages filled with the rawness of unfiltered thoughts and forbidden trysts. Each entry a testament to my insatiable cravings, my hunger for that which was just beyond the realms of morality. Our honeymoon was in Venice, a city of winding canals, shadowed alleys, and secrets whispered under the cloak of night. Chris and I had chosen it for its romantic allure, the promise of evenings spent in the soft glow of lanterns, the gentle lull of water against gondolas. But while Chris dreamed of the city's history, of art and architecture, I was drawn to its mystery, its ability to cloak one's indiscretions in layers of mist and shadow. And so it was on one of these nights, when the sky was painted a deep indigo, and Chris had retired early, exhausted from our daytime excursions, that I found myself wandering. The pull was magnetic, guiding me through narrow streets until I found myself in an intimate, dimly lit bar. It was there that I first encountered Charles, a man whose very presence radiated an undeniable power and charisma. He was the epitome of forbidden temptation, a challenge, a promise. Our conversation began innocuously enough, discussions of art, culture, the intoxicating beauty of Venice. But as the night deepened, so did our discourse. Every word, every glance was charged with an underlying current of desire. It was evident, even to a casual observer, that we were engaged in a dance, one of seduction, of pushing boundaries. But it was more than just physical attraction. With Charles, I felt seen. Every hidden part of me, every dark corner of my soul was laid bare. And he didn't flinch. Instead, he drew me in further, seducing not just my body but my mind. We spent that night together, letting go of societal constructs, immersing ourselves in the sheer pleasure of each other's company. When dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I returned to Chris, the weight of my betrayal making each step heavier than the last. As the days passed, while Chris was enamored by Venice's splendor, I was ensnared by Charles's magnetic pull. Each stolen moment, each whispered secret, each passionate encounter found its way into my diary, a chronicle of my descent into a world of lust and deception. But you see, it wasn't just about the physical act. No, it was the thrill of the forbidden, the intoxication of leading a double life, of wearing a mask so convincing that even I began to believe it. Charles became an addiction, a drug that I couldn't quit, and as our time in Venice drew to a close, I found myself torn between the comforting embrace of my marriage and the wild, untamed passion that Charles promised. In my diary's pages, I wrestled with these emotions, with the knowledge that I was stepping onto a path from which there might be no return. But amidst the guilt, the fear, the sheer exhilaration of it all, one thing became abundantly clear. This was just the beginning. The door to my dark desires had been flung open, and I was teetering on the edge, poised to plunge into its depths.
This is chapter 1 of a 6-part short story. The next chapter is chapter 2. If you like this chapter and would like to hear the other 5 chapters or more stories of love, betrayal, cheating, and candid confessions like this, please make sure you subscribe to the Romance Diaries on YouTube.